This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Well, welcome to Red Pill Nation's Daily Dose of Reality. I'm your host, Nathan Davis, and today's been an eventful day for freedom fighters in Dallas, Texas. Today was the day of commemorating the 50th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination. And they had an event. They had an event there at Dealey Plaza that was commemorating the event, but it was going by the official standing theory that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman that killed John F. Kennedy. Many people, the majority of people that have been polled, do not subscribe to that theory. They think it's bogus. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary that points to the fact that he was not killed by a lone gunman. And more than likely, Lee Harvey Oswald was just a scapegoat. Or as he said while he was being walked down underneath the jail house, that he was a patsy. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't even know why he was being arrested at the time. He thought he was being arrested and supposedly shooting a police officer, and even then he even seemed bewildered in the interviews that have survived since now about that event, because he didn't understand what was going on. So he didn't really seem like somebody that was, just murdered the president. And today, Alex Jones led a bunch of demonstrators. Now, I don't always listen or watch his show, but I knew he was going to be in Dallas demonstrating this, and I just wanted to see what was going to happen. So I went to Infowars.com/show and watched. And, well, everything was going smoothly. They did have barricades up to keep people out. You had to have an armband to get into the official area. You had to be chosen. You had to be somebody that would agree with official story and wasn't a conspiracy theorist, saying that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't, the shooter, or that he wasn't the only shooter. So they screened everybody that was allowed into this event. And they quartered off the streets up to 4 to 5 blocks away. So they went up to the barricades, and they were respectful. They, were told that they couldn't use a bullhorn, which Alex Jones is known for. They could not make any kind of commotion or anything of that nature, and they were respectful. And they stayed there for a little while, and, they decided that they were going to go back to the free speech area. This was an area that they quartered off and said that there was a park away from everything, and an area that would not interfere with the event. They went back there so he could, use his bullhorn and say some things. And then around, I think it was 2 o'clock, 2:30, that's when the event ended. They went back to the barricades, and he had actually called ahead and asked about being allowed into the plaza for their own little ceremony, where they were going to have speeches and lay a wreath out in commemoration of this event, and they agreed. The police were calling and trying to confirm all this. They let him into the area just before the plaza. They had that blocked off, but they let him into that area before the plaza. And they were going to let him into the plaza at 2:30. They got there at 2. So they were in this little area, and he pulls out his bullhorn, and he's, yelling and, doing all that. And they're talking to the police officers that are there while they're making these phone calls, and they're talking and back and forth. Now, this was the Dallas Police Department, okay? The Sheriff's Department all of a sudden came up. Now, they pushed past the police. The police were bewildered. They were like, what's going on? The sheriffs pushed through the barricades and punched Alex Jones and started pushing them forcibly. Now, this was all recorded. I mean, I'm watching this live. They started pushing the cameraman. They pushed a guy who had his 5-year-old daughter on his shoulders, and before he could get her off his shoulders, almost knocked them to the ground. There was a lot of commotion going on, and I thought something really bad was going to happen. It didn't escalate too badly, but the fact of the matter is that there was no provocation. There was no warning given by the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department did not say, hey, you need to get out of here or anything like that. They just pushed past the police and, started pushing them back. Then they created a human shield blocking off the area that they had removed the barricades 4 blocks away. They pushed them back quite a ways, or maybe it was a block, I don't know, but they pushed them quite a ways. And then they made a human barricade and kept them out. And it was just surprising that this was happening, with everybody watching. And I was shocked. I was really shocked at what was going on. I couldn't believe that they would be that blatant in how they were doing things. I think that it just shows how reckless the police state is nowadays. That they don't want protesting. They don't want anybody, to denounce the official stories of anything in the past that would implicate the government. It's not that far-fetched, and there's a lot of people that aren't into conspiracy theories that believe that John F. Kennedy was killed by, the government. And Johnson was involved in others. That they felt that way, all along. I have people that I know that don't subscribe to really any kind of conspiracy theory, but that one, they think that, there was something more to it, that it wasn't what they said it was, and the Warren Commission was wrong. And you have to look at this. The Warren Commission, first off, was was not really looking deep into the evidence. They kind of made sure that the official story was what they came up with. It's kind of like 9/11 and the 9/11 Commission. They had an overseer that used to be part of the Bush administration, and he finalized everything before it was put into the Commission's report, which means that basically the Bush administration had their hands in making sure that the report reflected what they wanted it to say. And that's the same thing with the Warren Commission. Now, there's a number of different theories that have come out. That he was killed by the mob, he was killed by the Cubans. I think that more than likely he was killed because he was trying to end the Federal Reserve. He was actually trying to put about legislation that would basically do away with the Federal Reserve. He was also trying to make sure that we stayed out of Vietnam under very heavy opposition from the military. He was adamant that we were not going to get involved militarily. And I think what happened is the military-industrial complex was going to make sure that they had a man in office that was going to do what they said. And Johnson was it. Now, I don't know if Johnson played a part in this or not. A lot of people believe he did. I think if he didn't, they probably scared him and said, look, if you don't do what we tell you, you'll end up like Kennedy did. And if you say anything, the same thing will happen. And we can make it look like an accident. That could have happened, or he could have been on it all the time, the whole time. Because he did sign the okay the day after he became president to send troops into Vietnam, which is very suspect. It seems like, he was the one that was going to get the job done. They knew that, he knew that, and they needed to get Kennedy out of the way. And so there's a video that's been circulating today on Facebook. It's a video I've seen a few times before of the Secret Service before the turn onto Dealey Plaza, onto the street of Dealey Plaza, hopped off the back of the motorcade. And the vehicle behind the motorcade, the car that held the president, which had all the Secret Service agents in it, stopped. The president went on without any security. Now, some people could say, well, that was, to make it more appealing and, all that. No, that's not how it appeared at all. And besides, there was people along the street the whole way, and they don't leave the president like that. It's a very clear video showing the one that was on the back, who was ordered off, throwing his hands up like, what's going on? So he followed orders and jumped off the back of that vehicle. This made it easy to access the president from behind and to make sure there was no attempt to protect him from any firing from the front. And so basically they took away his protective net before sending him into the kill zone. I mean, it seems like a setup. These things don't happen by coincidence. There's no coincidences in these type of events. And when you see a video like that, that's really damning against this being a lone gunman. I mean, it really is a coffin nail, I think, in the lone gunman theory, because you wouldn't have the Secret Service involved in it. So this runs really deep. The president was set up, and I think our government had a lot to do with it. I don't think it was the mob. I don't think it was anything like that. I think it was our government trying to get somebody out of the way that was not implementing things that the military-industrial complex and others wanted. He was going in the opposite direction. I mean, the bankers in this country have a lot of control. The Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the country, has control over our currency, how it's printed, when it's printed, and all manner of things. And so when you have somebody threaten our banking system, and that to me is just something that I think speaks volumes. He was threatening the central bank, and then he's offed. I think that's a big, deal. And now, because I don't have a lot of news, I mean, that today was the major thing that I saw. Nowadays we have a major police state, and it really boggles my mind. It really boggles my mind when people don't see this. You don't have to be, a highly intelligent rocket scientist or a scholarly figure. You don't have to be a super intellect to see what's going on. It's just basic common, sense that this is not right. It should hit people in the core that there's something wrong going on here. When people are, confined to have a demonstration, But we've been conditioned to believe that's okay. They've been eroding the Constitution for so long, and there's so many people that fed into it over time, and you get a little dose of this, authoritative government over time. You just keep getting another dose and another dose, and there's just certain people that have been drugged on this authoritative government. They believe everything they tell them. And that's a big problem. There's a lot of people that just can't see past it because that's all they've been fed, is this authoritative. They've been spoon-fed it, forcibly. And they start to believe the hype. They start to believe it, that these conspiracy theorists are nuts, and the authoritative dictatorial powers of our country are great, and they're looking out for us. I mean, most conspiracy theorists are very well read. They've read these policies. Now, I might not subscribe to their theories based on what they've read, but they're really well read in a lot of the controversy surrounding these events. And, you have the conspiracy of John F. Kennedy's death, and then you have the Gulf of Tonkin, which was a false flag event, a very well-known false flag event that most people don't even recall because they weren't alive back then, or it was downplayed after it came out that it was false. It never happened. That was the event that got us into the Vietnam War. It was the excuse-based event that got us in there. And people just don't want to believe it. I think that's the thing, is that they don't want to believe that they're being lied to by the government. And I think it's when someone's been dishonest to you, or I think it's kind of like somebody gets conned. They don't want to believe they've been conned. I look at people in Germany. I mean, there's a lot of people that sit there and say, "Oh, I can't believe that they didn't know what was going on with the Holocaust. I mean, I just can't believe that." I can, because I see it nowadays. With people just not seeing the direction our country's going, not seeing, this authoritative air over our government. They just don't see it. And I don't think that the people in Germany thought that they were killing Jews. I think they thought what was going on was they were using them for work, for labor, or they were sending them off somewhere else. They did, they saw them in these camps. They thought that the furnaces were there to keep them warm. They didn't think that they were humans being burned. And who would? I mean, that's the thing, is that, it's very easy to say that from the outside looking in. But when you're involved in it, and, you're under this regime, and they're doing some very scary things, I mean, it's kind of self-preservation to think that it's not going on. And I think that's what's going on now, is self-preservation. Go along with it so you don't cause any trouble, because if you cause trouble, they're going to come after you. They're going to throw your ass in jail. They're going to do something to you. They're going to kill you. You're going to be in a mass grave, or in those furnaces. A lot of it's self-preservation. Maybe deep down they knew, but I think a lot of them didn't. And it shows today. I think a lot of it has to do with the education system as well, because there's a lot of people that just, have no clue about our history. You ask them basic questions and they can't answer them. And that's not something that just happens in California or anywhere, New York. It happens all over the country. There's people that are just daft to basic history. I'm not saying I know every little nuance of history. I mean, I'm not a historian, but, I know our first president was George Washington. I know that, Joe Biden is the vice president, unfortunately. I know, certain things. And I'm learning all the time. I think we all are. I think even historians learn new things all the time. It's when you become somebody that thinks you know everything, or that you're an expert in something, that you turn off the valve of, taking in any new information. Your ego goes up. I mean, I've seen that a lot with people, is that, they throw out there that I've got this degree, or I've got that degree, or I'm an expert in this, or blah, blah, blah. And it's just an excuse to not be engaged in something. When people throw that out there, basically they're just saying, I'm better than you. And that gets you nowhere. I mean, if you are an expert in something, and there's some that are out there that don't have that, they're very humble in their aspects of explaining things. But when you get that elevated sense of ego, there's no way to tell you that you could be wrong. And that's one of the things I see happening a lot. I see it happening all over the place, is that there's no debate anymore in the country. There's nobody, it's just this back and forth, bam, bam, bam. As I've said so many times before, where they're just arguing with one another. They're personally attacking one another, and they're not looking into it, fully. I think that our government has worked so much against the people, but the people don't know how to stand up to them anymore. There's so many that don't know their rights. There's so many that don't know that they have rights that are there to protect them. And they can use that to their benefit when faced with this type of adversity. I say, learn your rights. Become familiar with them, because that's your ammunition when you come up against an authoritative figure like a police officer that is basically high on his badge, his power. And you can use that to defuse that person. You can use that to say, look, I know my rights. You can't trample my rights. I'll tell you right now, don't answer any questions cops ask you, because what they're trying to do is pin you. They're trying to get you to incriminate yourself, even if you're doing nothing wrong. That's just their training. That's what they've been trained to do now, is to find a reason to arrest you. So we've gained in a police state. We had a president with, Kennedy and with Eisenhower. Really, I think the two that were trying their best to keep the military-industrial complex from taking over. Excuse me. That was one of the major issues. I mean, the military wanted to do things and wanted to have more power than what should have been afforded to them. And of course, now they have all that. They've gained it under Bush and Obama. One thing was Clinton did reduce the size of the military. He did kind of take steps to reduce our military budget. Of course, many argue that he did it in the wrong way and it wasn't in our best interest, but he did help to reduce the military's size. But under Bush and Obama, it's been ramped back up. And now with Obama, he's trying to get rid of the upper echelon, the top brass of the military, and put in there people that will listen to him, will do what he says, no matter if it's for or against the Constitution. And it shows when you have people within the military or within the police department that just blindly follow orders and don't question anything. They're our first line of defense. Our police department is supposed to be our first line of defense if something goes wrong. But if they're not willing to stand up for the people, if they're just there following orders, and they don't understand that their oath included the Constitution and upholding it. My dog. Upholding it and protecting it. Defending it, basically. If they don't know that, they're easily led astray. And then they step on people's rights unknowingly because they are willingly ignorant. And that's a scary thing. It's a very scary thing. You know, what happened today in Dallas, you know, whether you like Alex Jones or not, was a travesty of justice against him and those protesters. You know, they were treated violently when they came there to peacefully protest. And were doing so. They weren't acting violent. They weren't acting threatening or anything of that nature. You know, they may have been making jokes or, you know, snide comments towards the police officers, but they should be used to haggling. And they're supposed to stay level-headed under pressure. And that's not what happened. It's just a sad state of events. You know, basically you had the mass media toting the official line that John F. Kennedy was killed by a lone gunman in the book depository. I was going to say suppository. The book depository with a very inaccurate weapon that no gun expert could do what he did in that moment. And the fact that he was seen, I believe, on the second floor eating his lunch moments before it happened. And there's a lot of people that say that it would be impossible for him to run up the stairs, fire the gun at the rate he did. I think it was 3 rounds in 6 seconds. Then come back down and meet up with, I think it was the owner of the book's depository and a police officer who, when he came out of the lunchroom, they said, "Oh, John F. Kennedy's been shot." And they asked him, and he said he wasn't acting like he was nervous. He didn't act out of breath. He seemed normal. And then what does Oswald do? He leaves and he goes to a movie. And supposedly on the way, he kills a police officer. So, I mean, there's certain things that just don't add up in the timeline. You know, History Channel tried to debunk it. I mean, I think they did a shoddy job. They didn't answer certain things. They just kind of molded it in a way that the evidence fit with the scenario. They did that with 9/11 as well. They only tackled certain aspects of it and just went with stuff that would fit the mold they had created. And so I've lost a lot of respect for the History Channel, even though really there's certain major inaccuracies with a number of their shows that they have out there. But it just shows that, you know, the media is not, and for that matter, the owners of networks are not on the side of the people. They're not willing to legitimately look into these things. They want to make sure that they want to make sure that the official stories held up and conspiracy theorists are laughed at. I mean, when you come forward and you say, "I believe that," I mean, people just snicker. And you ask them, "Have you looked into this? Have you read this? Have you, done it?" And they haven't. And that's disheartening in a lot of ways. It really is. It just shows the ignorance of the populace, that they're more willing to go out and do and be entertained and not be informed. I mean, our society now is more about entertainment than information. And I've been guilty of that. I mean, I'm getting rid of a lot of stuff that is entertainment-based because I don't use them anymore. And they're just sitting around collecting dust, and I have no need for them. So I'm getting rid of a lot of stuff in that area. Not saying that you shouldn't take time and, read a book or watch a movie or whatever, but, the primary focus should be about informing yourself and participating in that, debate and understanding. As long as people just remain silent, nothing will change. I think that's the key thing. If we stay silent and we fall in line and we don't do anything and we don't rock the boat, well, they're going to take more and more of our rights away. And they're doing it every day. They're doing it every day. In Britain, now it's mandatory for their kids to be taught theological classes. Whether the parents want them to be taught these classes or not is irrelevant. Because when the child steps into that school, the child goes under the ownership of the government. So they dictate what the children are going to learn, and they're going to learn theological classes based on world religions. So every religion, they're going to learn it, whether you want them to be exposed to it or not. And without the parent knowing what the material is going to be that they're going to be taught. Now, I'm fine with voluntary classes that teach the different religions around the world, because in that sense it's up to the student whether they take it, and that's not stepping on separation of church and state. What that's doing is it's saying, you have an option if you want to learn about these different religions. You're learning it, you're not being, indoctrinated to it. That's the difference. So yeah, that's happening in England. There's some people here that are afraid that that's going to happen because, if you don't want your kid to exposed to that, you shouldn't be forced to, be exposed to that. And, like the man earlier this week that was arrested for going to pick up his kid. The country has too much power over our children. I mean, and that's a scary thing. Is that we have to be afraid of how we're perceived in our parenting because they can take our children away. Because they say you're abusing your child. And that's going to get worse. I mean, what if they dictate that certain religious affiliations are harmful to your children? They could take them away. And there's people preaching that Christianity, religion as a whole, is harmful to kids. So with those type of people being influential in society, I mean, they could create authoritative laws that make it unlawful to teach your children a religious aspect. And this is serious. This is really serious. Individual rights are important. And we've really lost them in this country. Every day, we're losing them. Our founding fathers talked about our rights were endowed by our Creator. Now, your Creator could be whatever you wanted it to be or not to be. It was a placeholder. It was a metaphorical understanding in government and politics that there had to be a separation of people's rights from the government. And they had to say that, the Creator, your Creator, gave you those rights. And that's the placeholder. So if you're atheist, there's nothing there, but that's not the point. And there's a lot of atheists that misunderstand that that's not a theological perspective. What it is it's a perspective of, in Europe, it was authoritative government. Government chose your rights. Government decided what your rights were. They wanted it to be different. They wanted it to be where you had whatever rights you wanted. They were given to you by your Creator, as long as you didn't hurt anybody else or infringe upon their rights. That's the thing, is that it's very, very basic. As long as what you're doing does not infringe on somebody else's rights, then the government should have nothing to do with your actions, which is not the case anymore. So this metaphorical understanding of a creator giving you your rights and not the government dictating what your rights are was revolutionary. It was something that you never saw before, where basically they were saying, look, the government's not going to dictate to you what your rights are and what they aren't. These are your rights. You have them. They're protected. As long as you don't infringe on somebody else's rights, government will stay out of your business. And now we're in a total authoritative state. We are in a total authoritative government that dictates what they deem to be your rights. So they've taken that creator aspect out of it, saying, nope, government's here, they're above you, they tell you what your rights are. And many people fall in line and say, okay, well, these are my rights, and that list is getting smaller and smaller. The noose is getting tighter and tighter, and people don't budge. They don't, try to stop it because they think their hands are bound when they're not. They've been told their hands are bound, but they could take that rope from around their neck at any time and be free of government tyranny. And that's the problem here. And I think that, it really is harsh of our government to really step on us the way they are. And it really bothers me, that people don't see it. Sorry, I got distracted by something. But I really have a problem with people nowadays not seeing the light, not seeing the truth of what's going on. And not only that, championing I can't say the word, the behavior of the police. Yeah, I see it all the time. In actions, in words, posts, whatever, where people just say that the police were right in what they did. I mean, and this is going to get worse and worse. It's going to become more and more of a problem. And I think that what we are doing is we're accepting the authoritative nature of what's going on to save face, to remain free, because they have the guns, they have the jails, they have, the authority to put us in jail because they don't like what we're doing. They've given themselves the authority to indefinitely detain you. That's a scary thing. That's a very scary thing. And I understand why people are afraid to step up, but it angers me in the same, because we need that. We need people to step up. If people understood that if we all stood together and we all stood up, they would back down. Because at the deep core of it, they're cowards. They're building this facade around them because they're afraid of people taking away what they've taken from us. They're thieves. They've stolen everything from us. They've stolen real wealth from the nation. I mean, all of our currency is crap. It's not backed by anything. And that's something that's scary. That's something that's really, really scary. that people are saving up this fiat currency in a bank, thinking that they're going to have something for their retirement or something for a rainy day when something breaks down, and that's all crumbling away. And it's mainly because they don't follow the basic, financial markets. You don't have to be economist to understand the basis of what's going on. I would say watch Peter Schiff. He has a show on YouTube. I'd say, read some of these, economists, especially Austrian economists, that are sitting there saying, look, if we don't do something about what they're doing, well, really, there's nothing we can do. We're at the brink of the cliff as far as our currency goes, because quantitative easing is just basically, what they think it's doing is putting on the brakes. What most people that are, see it from an outside perspective are seeing that they're throwing oil down in front of us, and it's speeding us up closer and closer to the edge of the cliff, and we're going to fall off of it, and our currency is going to collapse. And when it happens, we're doomed. It's a real bad thing. And it's something that I have a problem with the financial aspect, is that the majority of people are consuming at a rate, and nobody's really, saying, look, we've got a major issue here. We don't have people informing the public that of any official standing that we are in dire straits. Now, I understand the point of we don't want to cause a panic, but in the same, breath, I would say, look, if you don't do that, you need to give people a fair shake. You need to give them a chance. You need to give them the ability to protect themselves. And if you don't, then it's going to cause major issues. Worse problems than, public outcry. If we reach that point where we have a breakdown of society, I mean, it's going to be very bad and scary, because nobody in this country has ever gone through that. And they laugh at it, but it happens all the time around the world. I mean, that's the thing that really gets to me, is people, say, oh, that can't happen here. It happens all the time and all over the world. I mean, it's a lot different, again, when you're looking at it from outside looking in. When you're in the midst of it, it's a lot different. It's scarier. And a lot of the people that are awake, a lot of the people that see what's happening and what's going on, are afraid of that outcome, and are afraid of the ramifications of it occurring, and wonder if they're prepared enough. I mean, really, you have to be prepared. It's going to happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just a matter of when. And it's coming up very soon, because of the fact that China, I've said this so many times, China and Russia and others have been hedging against the U.S. currency. They have been storing up actual intrinsic value as far as gold and silver. And that's something that I think we need to be mindful of. Gold and silver is something of value, and many of these countries, including third world countries, all they have in their vaults is the U.S. dollar. So it's not just going to affect us, it's going to affect all these other countries that don't get on the bandwagon with China or Russia. And many probably will, because they have a lot more to lose than we do. I mean, we'll have enough of a supply there to actually stop, to slow or reduce the effects initially, because we just have so much. But as those supplies dwindle, then we'll feel the burn, and it'll be more sudden. But the smaller countries that don't have the type of reserves as far as product that we do are going to feel it immediately if they don't jump ship. And they're probably going to be forced to, because if countries like China jump off the cliff and say, look, I'm done, I'm not doing this, and they have a parachute and they're like, bye, that's going to cause a major problem with us, because they own the majority of our debt, and it's just going to cause a whiplash effect. So that's the thing, is that if Kennedy had gotten his way, if Kennedy had ended the Fed, it would have been better. We would have not been in the shape we're in. We would be a stable financial country. But that didn't happen. If he had lived, we wouldn't have gotten involved in the Vietnam conflict. We wouldn't have involved ourselves in a needless war. And he probably would have held the military-industrial complex down, because the military-industrial complex during the Vietnam War grew substantially under Johnson and Nixon, and was a major force by the end of the Vietnam War. And really the only way to feed such a force is to perpetuate war. I mean, after World War II, it was the same way. I mean, we had this huge, military by then, and the way to feed it was to get into more wars. And so we just slowly involved ourselves in conflicts around the world until we're just involved in everything. And it shows. I mean, we have 900 bases around the world, but we're closing bases here. We're not protecting our borders. I mean, the borders are in disrepair. You have lack of guard, and it's just sad. I think that those that sit there and think that Obama has gotten us out of conflicts fail to understand that he hasn't, that he has perpetuated war. But he's done so through drone strikes and other means. We got out of Iraq. Well, we're still in Afghanistan. We're still, perpetuating drone strikes. We're still increasing our police state here and surveillance. And, it's just gotten so out of control. The government seems paranoid of what the people will see them doing. And when somebody like Snowden presents something, then all of a sudden he becomes a traitor to the country. And I'll say this, is that the Tea Party, their choice for their candidate for their top choice basically for 2016 election is Marco Rubio, who said, let's see, he said at an event at the American Enterprise Institute that Edward Snowden was a traitor. That he was hiding in countries that were violators of liberty and human rights. And what are we? We're so free. I've lost a lot of respect for the man. I mean, for saying that, he's saying also that, Al-Qaeda's not using carrier pigeons, so we have to use these surveillance techniques in order to make sure that we catch these people. Again, that's another problem. with, our politicians. Our politicians are throwing us under the bus. They're saying things that are against us. And I think that what we need to remember is that anybody, any politician, even if they seem like they're, on the right side, if they start talking like this, either they sold out or they really don't know what liberty and freedom is. And that's a major problem in the country, is that we have so many people, in politics that have sold out to special interest groups, to all these different entities other than their constituents. I'll just say that, because and I have a lot of interruptions tonight. There's a lot of stuff going on behind me. I'm sorry, I got distracted. When people say something like that, and they put somebody down that came out as a patriot, I mean, Snowden brought stuff to the Americans' attention that they didn't know what that was going on, that were, travesties of justice against the American people. He brought this to our attention. And for somebody to call him a traitor for that and fall in line with Obama, I mean, that is a scary thing. I mean, and he's the Tea Party's choice for, president in 2016. I mean, I think the Tea Party, which is a grassroots group, needs to really think about that. That he's talking about the surveillance is fine. That the NSA, what they're doing is fine. That's a scary thing. We don't need a bigger surveillance state, and we don't need surveillance at this state anyway. I mean, they're tracking everything. They're tracking trends, and that's the thing, is that's a big negative with our country, is that they are... It's a big negative with our country, because we are looking at a total loss of control of ourselves. They've stripped the Constitution. Our First Amendment right is gone, for the most part. Fourth Amendment is gone. Second Amendment, is being challenged all the time, because of, again, events that happen that only equate for 3% of the total gun deaths in this country. And it reminds me of 2005, I think it was, and that was called the Year of the Shark, because we had 3 shark attacks on the East Coast. The total number of shark attacks that year were 5. The total number of shark attacks the year before were 5. The total number before that were 5. It was no increase. It was just the location was, on the East Coast. We had 3 attacks, and they were close together, and so, we got the Year of the Shark. It's a negative that is being produced by propaganda. They sit there and make it out like they're protecting our children by taking guns away from people. Law-abiding citizens. Somebody that is a criminal is not going to follow these rules, and that's the thing that's illogical about the mindset, is that criminals will follow these rules that we set down because, I don't know. I have no idea the mindset. But people fall in line with that. They believe that. And then you have people printing guns. The first printed metal gun came out. I mean, it's showing that you can't stop people from getting a weapon if they want a weapon. You can't stop people from making weapons. I mean, they've done it in the past. During World War II, the French Resistance made guns called the Liberator. It was a one-shot deal, and what it was meant to do was so that you could go up behind a Nazi soldier, shoot him in the back, and take their gun. Because guns were outlawed in occupied territories by the Nazis. And for the Jews. Jews could not have guns. And the first plastic gun that was created was called the Liberator. And it was a single-shot gun. And, it was just to demonstrate that you really can't, regulate this problem away. It's not going to go away. And stepping on people's rights, on legitimate gun owners' rights that are following the law, isn't going to stop criminal activity, isn't going to stop gun violence. And they're not addressing the real causes of gun violence, which are, the drug war, and illegal prostitution, things of that nature, that because they've been forced underground have caused more problems and more harm than benefit. And that's the problem with society. One of Kennedy's last addresses was about, secrecy. It was talking about how we are against secrecy. I play it before I start the show. And the live show. But it talks about secrecy. And for the last 5 minutes of the show, I'm going to play that.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.